Britain's most prolific child killer.
How 13 babies had died unexpectedly.
I was just praying to God, saying, what has happened to my child?
The babies were stable beforehand, showing no signs of illness, and then underwent a sudden and catastrophic collapse.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in mortality rate? Yes.
She's taken lives. She's tried to take other babies' lives.
Why would a nurse, whose job it was to care for babies, murder and harm them?
Every year, thousands of premature babies are born, arriving in the world with life in one hand and death in the other. Their survival often depends on the dedicated care of neonatal nurses. But what happens when the person appointed to save their lives becomes the very source of their demise? At the Countess of Chester Hospital, 9 babies died in quick succession under chillingly similar circumstances. Each collapse, each death, occurred on Lucy Letby's watch, a nurse once trusted to protect the most vulnerable. In this case, however, it wasn't medical error or oversight. It was something far more sinister. This is the story of a nurse whose actions shocked a nation, revealing a betrayal that no one saw coming.
The people that serial killers target, by and large, are older people, or they target very, very young people, specifically in a neonatal unit in this case, where again, small babies with chronic underlying health care, where their deaths won't be commented upon or seen as being suspicious, because tragically, some babies born in that situation will die.
Lucy Letby was born on January 4, 1990, in Hereford, England. Raised in a middle-class family, Letby's early life was by all accounts ordinary. She was the only child of her parents, Susan and John Letby, who were reportedly supportive and doting. From a young age, Letby showed a keen interest in helping others, particularly in the field of healthcare. Her aspiration to become a nurse was something that she spoke about frequently, and it became clear early on that she had a natural inclination toward caregiving. She attended a local comprehensive school in Hereford, where she was known as a quiet and diligent student, excelling academically. Letby's determination to work in neonatal care specifically was formed during her teenage years, when she developed a fascination with infant care, particularly in high-risk environments. After completing her secondary education, she pursued a nursing degree at the University of Chester, one of the top institutions for nursing in the UK. During her time at university, Letby continued to impress her peers and professors with her hard work and dedication. She specialized in neonatal care early in her studies, focusing on caring for the most vulnerable, premature and ill newborns. Her clinical placements gave her real-world experience, and Letby earned a reputation as someone who was reliable and trustworthy in high-stress situations. By 2011, Letby had successfully completed her degree and began working at the Countess of Chester Hospital in 2012. She quickly gained her certification as a registered nurse in the neonatal unit, and colleagues often described her as professional and competent. Letby was passionate about her role in the unit, which involved working with newborns who required various levels of care. Her dedication was seen as an asset to the team. A telling moment in her early career came when Letby participated in fundraising efforts for the hospital, demonstrating her enthusiasm and personal investment in her work. In a 2013 staff profile, Letby shared how much she enjoyed supporting the families of the babies in her care and seeing the progress that her young patients made under the unit's care. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly successful career and nurturing personality, subtle cracks began to emerge. Some colleagues noted that Letby seemed particularly drawn to high-intensity cases involving the sickest babies. She reportedly found non-intensive care work boring, preferring to be at the heart of the more critical cases. As she advanced in her career, her responsibilities grew, and by 2015, she had qualified to work in intensive care, a highly specialized area requiring immense skill and focus. Little did anyone know at the time, these early career milestones would later be scrutinized, and seemingly innocuous behaviors would take on a darker significance. Letby's story was far from what it appeared on the surface, and soon, her dedication would be called into question in ways no one could have anticipated. Now, before we continue, I'd like to ask you a small favor. Our channel is still new, and every single subscriber helps us grow. Your support motivates us to produce even more in-depth, high-quality content like this. So if you're enjoying these deep dives into medical mishaps and want to stay updated on future videos, please consider subscribing. It's a simple action that would mean the world to us and ensures you never miss out on any new cases. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the case. Lucy Letby's early years in the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit appeared to be marked by professional growth and commitment. By 2015, Letby had not only gained extensive experience, but had also earned the trust of her colleagues, and she was one of the few nurses trusted to handle complex cases in the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU. However, as her responsibilities increased, so did the peculiar circumstances surrounding her work. The first major incident that raised red flags occurred in 2015. That year, the hospital's NICU experienced an unusual rise in the number of sudden infant deaths and collapses. These events were typically unpredictable, but what made them more concerning was the number of these incidents occurring under Letby's supervision. Babies who had previously been stable or recovering would suddenly collapse or show signs of acute distress, often without any clear medical explanation. Letby, who was often present when these collapses occurred, became a silent focal point of concern for some of her colleagues. Dr. Stephen Brary, one of the lead consultants in the unit, noticed this troubling pattern. He began to review the cases more closely, comparing Letby's shift patterns with the incidents in question. His initial thoughts leaned toward coincidence. After all, Letby was one of the most frequently scheduled nurses, often taking on extra shifts due to her strong work ethic. However, the statistical improbability of so many incidents occurring during her watch began to gnaw at him and other staff members. Despite these mounting concerns, Letby's outward behavior did little to indicate anything suspicious. She maintained her reputation as a diligent and compassionate nurse, known for her caring demeanor and willingness to go above and beyond for her patients. If there were any internal struggles or signs of distress, she did not display them to her colleagues. On the contrary, she appeared as composed as ever, even in the face of mounting tragedies on the unit. As the neonatal unit continued to experience more unexplained collapses, the hospital's management remained hesitant to take formal action. Dr. Brary and others raised concerns about Letby to the hospital administration, but their warnings were met with resistance.
Doctors and nurses all have the regulatory bodies and that we have to answer to. And quite often we'll see senior managers who have no apparent accountability for what they do in our trusts and then move to other trusts. And you worry about their future actions, and there doesn't seem to be any system to make them accountable and for them to justify their actions.
Some in management believed that the deaths and collapses were coincidental, chalking them up to the vulnerability of the infants in the unit. Others felt that more evidence was needed before accusing a well-regarded nurse like Letby of anything improper. Meanwhile, Letby continued working in the unit, with some staff members now quietly observing her more closely. Although no formal action had been taken, suspicion was slowly growing behind the scenes. The hospital decided to review its policies and the broader operations of the neonatal unit. But for the time being, Letby remained in her role, trusted with the lives of the most vulnerable infants. As 2015 progressed, the unexplained collapses and deaths continued at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit, further deepening suspicions. One of the babies at the center of the growing concerns was baby A premature infant born in June 2015, along with his twin sister. The twins were delivered early, but like many premature babies, they had been expected to require some support, yet ultimately recover with proper care. Baby A's birth was initially a success. He was placed in an incubator to stabilize his vital signs, but no major health concerns were raised during his first few hours. However, shortly after his birth, Baby A experienced a sudden and sharp decline in health. He was stable one moment, and the next, his oxygen levels had plummeted to critical levels. The medical team rushed to resuscitate him, administering oxygen and performing all necessary life-saving measures. Despite their efforts, Baby A tragically could not be saved. His death, although devastating, was not initially treated as highly suspicious. Premature infants are inherently fragile, and complications can arise without warning. But the sudden collapse of Baby A didn't sit well with some of the staff, particularly since his twin sister had shown no similar signs of distress. Dr. Stephen Brary, already wary of the rising number of collapses, began to keep a closer eye on Letby's involvement during these incidents. Baby A's collapse occurred during one of Letby's shifts, making it another unfortunate case that linked her to a neonatal tragedy. Despite the initial shock and grief surrounding Baby A's death, no immediate action was taken against Letby or any member of the hospital staff. It was only when Baby A's twin sister, Baby B, experienced a near-fatal collapse the following day that the suspicions escalated significantly. Like her brother, Baby B had shown signs of improvement following her birth. But mere hours after her twin's death, she too suddenly deteriorated under Letby's care. Thankfully, Baby B was successfully resuscitated, but her collapse mirrored the sudden and unexplained nature of her brother's. Dr. Brary and the neonatal team were now on high alert. The rapid decline of both twins within such a short span of time, particularly when their conditions had been stable, was highly unusual. The fact that Letby was present during both collapses raised even more concerns, though no concrete evidence had yet emerged to definitively link her to the tragedies. At this point, the hospital management remained hesitant to take drastic steps, such as removing Letby from the ward or calling in external investigators. The situation remained tense, with staff quietly observing Letby's behavior and interactions. The incidents involving Baby A and Baby B were just the beginning of a tragic pattern, and it would not be long before more babies in the unit would face similar, and in some cases, fatal circumstances. The next alarming case occurred only days later, in June 2015, when Baby C, another premature infant, experienced a sudden and severe health crisis. Like the previous cases, Baby C had been born early and was being closely monitored in the neonatal unit. His condition, while delicate, was considered stable enough that he was not expected to face any life-threatening complications. Baby C was born to a family who had already endured the anxiety of his premature birth. But like many parents in the neonatal unit, they held on to hope as their baby showed signs of normal progress. The medical staff remained vigilant, as always, ensuring that his oxygen levels and vital signs were monitored consistently. It was during this period that Lucy Letby was again present on shift, attending to the babies in the unit, including Baby C. In what had now become a troublingly familiar scenario, Baby C's health took an abrupt turn for the worse. Seemingly out of nowhere, his oxygen levels began to drop drastically, causing alarm among the medical team. The doctors and nurses rushed to his aid, performing emergency resuscitation techniques and administering oxygen in an effort to stabilize him. Despite their best efforts, Baby C's collapse proved fatal. Once again, there was no immediate medical explanation for Baby C's sudden deterioration. Like the cases of Baby A and Baby B, his decline came without warning, leaving the hospital staff grappling with yet another loss. Baby C's death, however, now added to the growing pattern of tragedies occurring under Letby's supervision. At this point, more staff members began to privately voice their concerns, noting the unsettling fact that Letby had been present during all 3 collapses. The infants, while premature and vulnerable, had not exhibited the kinds of medical conditions that would typically lead to such rapid and fatal outcomes. The hospital's internal discussions grew more serious, with some staff calling for an investigation into the possibility that something, or someone, within the unit was contributing to these deaths. But despite these growing concerns, Lucy Letby remained on duty. The hospital management was still reluctant to launch a formal investigation, citing a lack of concrete evidence linking Letby directly to the deaths. Meanwhile, more babies under Letby's care continued to experience unexplained health crises. The next critical case was that of baby D, a premature infant born later in June 2015, just days after baby C's passing. Baby D, like the others, was considered to be in a stable condition. Although she was vulnerable due to her prematurity, there were no immediate concerns for her life. Her parents, understandably anxious given the circumstances of her early birth, were hopeful that with the right care, baby D would pull through. However, in an all-too-familiar scenario, baby D's health suddenly deteriorated in the early hours of the morning. She experienced a significant drop in oxygen levels, setting off alarms in the neonatal unit. As had been the case with the previous victims, her collapse occurred while Lucy Letby was on duty. The medical team rushed to resuscitate baby D, employing all available measures to save her. Although she briefly stabilized, she collapsed again a short time later. Tragically, despite their best efforts, baby D did not survive. This marked yet another unexplained and sudden death in the neonatal unit. And once again, Letby had been present at the scene. What made baby D's case particularly concerning was that it followed the same disturbing pattern as the earlier cases. The collapse had no clear medical cause, and baby D had shown no signs of significant distress prior to the incident. For Dr. Stephen Brary and other members of the medical team, this was the point where suspicions turned into serious concern. Dr. Brary, by this time, had already flagged the earlier incidents to hospital management, but his warnings had been met with hesitation. The hospital's leadership continued to struggle with the idea that one of their own nurses could be responsible for such tragedies. As with baby A, baby B, and baby C, baby D's case was initially reviewed, but no concrete action was taken against Letby. What made this situation more complex was Letby's outward demeanor. She continued to be seen as a caring and dedicated nurse by many of her colleagues, maintaining her professional persona while working with the most vulnerable babies in the unit. But behind the scenes, the coincidences were becoming too frequent and too striking to ignore. Still, despite the growing concerns among some of the staff, hospital management was reluctant to escalate the situation further. Instead of launching a full-scale investigation, the incidents were treated as isolated tragedies. The lack of decisive action meant that Letby continued to work on the unit, even as the number of unexplained deaths continued to climb. By the time baby E, another premature infant, entered the unit in August 2015, there was already an unspoken tension among some staff members. Baby E was born prematurely, and like the other cases, required close monitoring. His condition, while fragile, was considered stable. The medical team had no immediate concerns, and his parents, while worried as any parents of premature babies would be, were reassured by the hospital that baby E was receiving the best care available. But like those before him, baby E's condition suddenly worsened during a night shift when Lucy Letby was on duty. In what had become an all-too-familiar scenario, baby E experienced a significant and unexpected drop in his oxygen levels. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and the medical team once again sprang into action to try to save his life. Despite their frantic efforts, baby E succumbed to the collapse. What made baby E's case even more alarming was the discovery of an unusual amount of blood around his mouth, a detail that stood out to the doctors on the scene. This was not a common symptom of a premature infant collapse, and it raised serious questions about the true nature of baby E's death. Dr. Brary and his colleagues were now certain that something more sinister was occurring in the unit. By this time, the link between Lucy Letby's presence and the string of sudden collapses and deaths was becoming impossible to ignore. She had been present during every major incident, and the unusual nature of baby E's collapse, particularly the blood around his mouth, pushed Dr. Brary to raise the alarm once more with hospital management. Despite these concerns, Letby's role in the neonatal unit remained unchanged. The hospital administration, still reluctant to accept that one of their own nurses might be involved in such a heinous crime, was hesitant to take immediate action. The decision to formally investigate or remove Letby from the unit continued to be delayed, allowing her to remain in a position of care over the most vulnerable infants in the hospital. Just one day later, baby F, baby E's twin brother, also experienced a sudden and life-threatening collapse. The twin had been stable in the neonatal unit, seemingly unaffected by his brother's death, and was being closely monitored. Like many premature babies, baby F was receiving nutritional support through intravenous lines, a routine process in neonatal care. However, baby F's collapse didn't come in the same form as the others. During Letby's shift, the infant's blood sugar levels dropped sharply and inexplicably, triggering alarms. His blood glucose levels were dangerously low, a condition that, if left untreated, could cause seizures, brain damage, or death. Doctors were immediately concerned, as baby F had shown no signs of instability before this sudden event. What raised even more alarm among the doctors was that upon investigation, it was discovered that baby F had been injected with insulin, a substance that should not have been administered to him. This was a crucial turning point in the unfolding events, as it became clear that this collapse had not occurred due to natural causes. Premature babies like baby F would not require insulin, and its presence in his system indicated that someone had deliberately introduced it, causing the sharp drop in his blood sugar. Despite the clear evidence of wrongdoing, Lucy Letby remained on duty, and no immediate actions were taken to remove her from the neonatal unit. The hospital management continued to hesitate, still grappling with the shocking possibility that a trusted nurse could be involved in harming the very babies she was supposed to care for. Dr. Stephen Brary, who had now witnessed a series of collapses and deaths during Letby's shifts, once again raised the alarm, urging the hospital to take more definitive action. The case of baby F highlighted the growing concern that these incidents were not random or coincidental. Unlike previous cases, which had resulted in tragic deaths, baby F's collapse provided physical evidence, the presence of insulin in his bloodstream, that pointed directly to an act of intentional harm. This discovery further cemented suspicions among the hospital staff, but for reasons that would later be scrutinized, the management remained reluctant to involve the police at this stage. In the meantime, the situation escalated further as another baby, known as baby G, became the next victim in the tragic series of events. Baby G was the most premature infant in the unit at the time, born in September 2015, around 16 weeks early. Despite the severity of her prematurity, baby G had been making steady progress, and her survival against the odds was a small triumph for the medical team. By the time baby G reached her 100th day of life, the staff and her family were cautiously optimistic. She had stabilized and was even beginning to be fed milk, both orally and through a nasogastric tube. But the celebration was short-lived. During the early hours of September 7, 2015, baby G suddenly deteriorated, experiencing a series of severe seizures. Her oxygen levels dropped dramatically, and she vomited a large amount of milk, which led to significant respiratory issues.
To God, saying, what has happened to my child?
I saw doctors around the trolley and they're just pumping his heart like a rag doll, really. The image that I saw was just horrendous. That image I'll never forget because it's on the brain.
Once again, Lucy Letby was present during the event. Although the medical team worked swiftly to stabilize baby G, the damage had already been done. Baby G was left with irreversible brain damage due to the severe oxygen deprivation she suffered during the collapse. Unlike previous cases, baby G survived, but the lasting effects of the attack were devastating. She would later be diagnosed with severe physical and mental disabilities, requiring constant care for the rest of her life. As the months passed, another infant, baby H, became the next victim in this horrific pattern. Baby H, born prematurely in late 2015, had initially shown signs of improvement, like many of the other babies in the unit. Her condition, while requiring constant monitoring, was stable, and the medical team was optimistic about her recovery. However, on 2 consecutive nights in September 2015, baby H suffered 2 separate sudden collapses, both of which occurred while Lucy Letby was on duty. On the first night, baby H's oxygen levels dropped alarmingly, and despite immediate intervention by the medical staff, she struggled to recover. The team worked tirelessly to stabilize her, and after several minutes, they succeeded in restoring her oxygen levels, but the event left everyone deeply concerned. The following night, almost exactly 24 hours after her initial collapse, baby H suffered another sudden respiratory crisis, once again during Letby's shift. This time, the collapse was even more severe. Baby H stopped breathing, and the resuscitation efforts were far more desperate. The medical team, already on edge from the previous night's scare, rushed to her side and managed to save her life again, but her condition remained precarious. These repeated collapses, so close in time and with no clear medical explanation, further deepened the suspicion surrounding Letby's involvement. What was particularly concerning was that baby H had been improving steadily before these incidents, with no prior indications that her health would take such a dramatic turn. Her sudden respiratory failures mirrored the unexplained collapses of other infants, adding more weight to the growing body of circumstantial evidence against Letby. By this point, the hospital staff had become increasingly vocal in their concerns about Letby's presence during these incidents. Dr. Stephen Brary, along with other senior medical staff, again pushed for Letby to be removed from the unit, or at least subjected to a more thorough investigation. However, despite these escalating warnings, the hospital administration remained hesitant to take direct action. Internal reviews were conducted, and the collapses were scrutinized, but no formal accusations were made against Letby, and she continued to work shifts in the neonatal unit. Then came February 2016, when baby I was born. She had a premature birth, weighing just over 2 pounds. From the start, her condition was fragile, but she responded well to the intensive care provided. Over the first few weeks of her life, baby I made gradual improvements, giving her family hope that she was on the road to recovery. However, in April 2016, baby I experienced a sudden and catastrophic collapse. Her oxygen levels plummeted unexpectedly during a night shift, once again when Lucy Letby was on duty. The medical team rushed to resuscitate her, and after intense efforts, they managed to stabilize her condition. However, the reprieve was short-lived. Over the next few weeks, baby I would experience multiple similar collapses, each one more severe than the last. Despite the medical staff's best efforts to save her, baby I tragically passed away after a final collapse in October 2016. What set baby I's case apart was the sheer number of collapses she endured. Each time she would stabilize for a brief period, only to deteriorate once again. This recurring pattern of sudden, unexplained declines, combined with the fact that Letby was on duty during each of these incidents, only deepened the suspicion surrounding her. Dr. Stephen Brary, who had been increasingly vocal about Letby's involvement, raised the alarm yet again with hospital management. Brary, now backed by other senior doctors, made another formal appeal to hospital executives, urging them to remove Letby from clinical duties pending an investigation. Their primary justification for inaction was the lack of direct evidence. Although Brary had presented a compelling pattern linking Letby's shifts to the unexplained collapses and deaths, hospital administrators insisted that coincidence alone was not enough to warrant removing Letby from her role. The lead neonatologist had pointed out repeatedly that Letby had been present during each significant collapse, yet this correlation was dismissed as not substantial enough to initiate an investigation. Instead, the hospital's leadership suggested scaling back services or changing protocols, rather than directly confronting the possibility of internal foul play. Eventually, after the deaths of baby I and several other infants, the pressure mounted to the point where hospital management could no longer ignore the warning.
Senior managers agreed to hold an external investigation. That never happened. 4 months later, 4 more babies were dead, and a staff analysis linked Lucy Letby to every one of them. By the following February, 10 babies had died, but when doctors asked 2 senior managers for an urgent meeting, they did not respond for 3 months. In June, over 2 days, 2 more babies died. Lucy Letby was on shift for both. By now, there had been 13 unexplained deaths.
In July 2016, Letby was finally removed from the neonatal unit and reassigned to the hospital's Patient Safety and Risk Office. Although this move temporarily removed her from direct patient care, it fell short of a full investigation or police involvement. Hospital executives still hesitated to involve law enforcement, fearing potential backlash or reputational damage if their suspicions proved unfounded. This decision to keep the matter internal would have significant consequences. While Letby was no longer working in the neonatal unit, the fact that no formal investigation had been launched meant that the hospital's response was perceived as inadequate by many staff members. It wasn't until 2017, after continued pressure from Brary and other doctors, that the hospital commissioned an external review by the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health, RCPCH, to examine the unit's spike in infant deaths. However, it couldn't provide with any clear answer at the time. While it identified staffing issues and lack of adequate senior cover in the neonatal unit, it did not definitively link Letby to the deaths. Despite this, Dr. Stephen Brary and his colleagues continued to push for further investigations. They remained convinced that Letby's presence during so many unexplained incidents was not coincidental. By mid-2017, hospital management could no longer ignore the mounting pressure. With no resolution from the RCPCH review and internal reviews continuing to fall short of action, they finally decided to involve the police. Cheshire Constabulary launched a full criminal investigation in July 2017, focusing on the suspicious deaths and sudden collapses of newborns in the neonatal unit. This was the turning point that would lead to one of the most disturbing revelations in British medical history. The investigation, codenamed Operation Hummingbird, meticulously examined medical records, shift patterns, and post-mortem results to establish a connection between Letby and the infant deaths. The police quickly uncovered a series of chilling details. Among them were falsified medical records, social media searches Letby had made about the families of the babies she had harmed, and most damning of all, handwritten notes found in Letby's home. In these notes, Letby expressed deep emotional turmoil and guilt, writing phrases like, "I am evil, I did this," which suggested she was grappling with her actions. Other notes included equally alarming statements, such as, "I don't deserve to live, I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough," and "I am a horrible person," all of which indicated a troubling awareness of her crimes. In addition to the confessional-like statements, Letby also wrote, "Today is your birthday, and you are not here, and I am so sorry for that," hinting at her ongoing thoughts about the babies she had harmed. These notes revealed not only a recognition of the harm she had caused, but also a sense of emotional conflict that would become key evidence during her trial. These incriminating writings, along with falsified medical records showing that Letby had altered timings and other details to cover her tracks, and the fact that she had searched for information about the families of the victims on social media, helped build a case against her. The combination of these discoveries left no doubt about her involvement, leading the police to move forward with formal charges. In July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested for the first time. Following extensive police interviews and further investigation, she was rearrested in 2019 and again in 2020 as more evidence emerged.
Oh, Lucy, is it?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Chester, please. So can you step in 2 seconds?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
The smile's gone, and she's in handcuffs a few minutes later.
Yeah, not a problem.
A nurse who murdered babies, Lucy Letby has always denied and never explained.
Formally charged in November 2020, she faced multiple charges, including the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 others, all of whom had been in her care at the Countess of Chester Hospital between 2015 and 2016. Letby's trial began in October 2022 at Manchester Crown Court and would stretch over several months, as the prosecution laid out the harrowing details of her actions. The trial was complex, involving extensive medical evidence and expert testimony to prove that the collapses and deaths were not natural, but had been deliberately caused. The prosecution detailed how Letby had used various methods to harm the infants, including injecting air into their bloodstreams and administering insulin to cause hypoglycemic episodes. These methods were designed to mimic natural medical complications, making it difficult for her colleagues to suspect foul play at first. Throughout the trial, the prosecution relied heavily on the meticulous review of hospital records, staff rotas, and Letby's shift patterns. They demonstrated that she had been the only nurse present during each of the suspicious incidents. The Crown also presented Letby's handwritten notes, where she had made chilling admissions, alongside messages she had sent to colleagues, which, in retrospect, appeared to document her actions as the events unfolded. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Letby maintained her innocence, claiming that she had been unfairly targeted due to the tragic and unfortunate nature of the deaths in the neonatal unit. However, the prosecution countered these claims by emphasizing the statistical improbability of so many deaths occurring under her care alone, and the fact that other nurses in the unit, working similar hours, had not seen the same patterns. In August 2023, the jury reached a verdict. Lucy Letby was found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others during her time working at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit.
And the 7 offences of attempted murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Because the seriousness of your offences is exceptionally high, I direct that the early release provisions do not apply. The order of the court, therefore, is a whole life order on each and every offence, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison.
The trial concluded with a resounding conviction, confirming that Letby had deliberately harmed and killed vulnerable infants, causing unimaginable suffering for the families involved. The courtroom heard details of Letby's calculated methods, including injecting air into babies' veins, overfeeding them milk, and administering insulin to cause fatal drops in blood sugar. Letby had masked her actions as medical complications, leading her colleagues to believe that the deaths were tragic but natural outcomes of the infants' fragile conditions. However, the combination of Letby's handwritten confessions, medical records showing her direct involvement, and the detailed timeline linking her to the collapses made it impossible to deny her guilt. Following her conviction, Lucy Letby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, forever marking her as one of the most prolific child serial killers in the UK's history. The judge condemned her actions as cruel, calculated and cynical, stating that she had betrayed the trust placed in her as a nurse. While the families of the victims expressed relief that justice had been served, they were also painfully aware that no verdict could undo the profound trauma and loss they had endured. How could someone who was trusted to care for the most innocent lives commit such atrocities? How does one become capable of taking not just one life, but the lives of those so fresh and vulnerable? And those notes found in her home, were they the confessions of someone overwhelmed with guilt? Or could they be seen as trophies, symbols of a serial killer's twisted satisfaction? And what about the medical institution itself? Could this all have been prevented if the hospital had acted on the early warnings? If they had reported Letby sooner, could more lives have been saved? We'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you make sense of such chilling actions? Let us know in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to like and share this video to raise awareness about the case. If you haven't already, check out our recent uploads appearing on your screen now.